Hey, it's your boy back in the house. Today's video is about bread and exactly to why you should avoid bread if you want to lose weight. That's the title of today's video. And most people know that they need to avoid bread because it has a lot of carbohydrates, it has a lot of carbs. But where this actually, most people don't understand it, this goes much deeper. So I want you to go actually watch till the end of this video so I can give you clarity on exactly what glycemic index is and how this actually goes much deeper than just carbohydrates, and how does that glycemic index of bread affect our hormone called insulin. So after you eat bread, insulin hormone spikes up, and exactly then I'm gonna show you what insulin hormone does, why it makes us fat. Exactly, I will show you the cause and effect of gaining weight, what causes you to gain fat, specifically fat, and also how does insulin hormone, how it makes us fat, our fat metabolism. I'll actually be drawing here. I'm gonna show you a fat cell and exactly how that fat cell is affected after you eat bread. And then also I'm gonna show you exactly what hormone gets spiked up after you do not eat bread, and that how does that hormone actually makes us lose weight. Now before we start with this video, I want you to go down below, leave a like, comment and subscribe, and press that bell button to get notified when I upload a new video, because I post some amazing stuff when it comes to weight loss. Now let's begin. So the first thing I want you to understand is that bread has a lot of carbohydrates. But carbohydrates are not bad necessarily, they are. But what makes them bad versus what makes good carbs is that you need to understand that vegetables and fruits have carbohydrates as well. But what makes them good is that they're natural. But what makes carbohydrates bad necessarily is the processing of those carbohydrates. Because in order to actually make bread, what do you need? You need flour. And how to make flour, you need to actually process and refine wheat. And the reason why processing and refining carbohydrates are really bad is because after you process and refine, that makes super easy for our body when it actually goes in our body to get digested. It gets digested and absorbed by our body super fast. And what that does, that spikes up glucose, blood sugar, in our blood super quickly. And the reason why it's that bad, this leads us to another point. This is called glycemic index of food. Basically, the meaning of glycemic index, I'm gonna pop a picture. As you can see, bread has a high number of glycemic index. And what does that number mean next to that food? That means that food is gonna spike up glucose, aka blood sugar, in our bloodstreams super quickly. So the lower the number next to that food is, that means the lower amount of glucose is gonna be released in our bloodstreams after eating that food. And as you can see, bread has super high glycemic index. And what that's gonna do is gonna spike up glucose in our bloodstream super quickly. So why does bread make us fat? So this is exactly what happens. You eat bread, and then after you eat bread, bread has high glycemic index. And what that's going to do is going to spike up glucose, let's say blood sugar, in our bloodstreams. So what happens when you have high levels of blood sugar in your bloodstream? Your body needs to spike up a hormone called insulin. So insulin is the hormone that actually takes blood sugar into our cells of our muscles, liver, brain, where they get used as energy. Basically, that's the main source of energy that our body uses. It doesn't use calories. So your body, you eat calories, and those calories get turned into glucose. So what that happens then, you have high levels of blood sugar in your bloodstream, and that's going to lead to high levels of insulin. So the higher glycemic index that food has, the more of insulin hormone that food is going to spike up. And the lower the glycemic index of food, that means the lower levels of insulin is going to get released. And why insulin is really bad if you want to lose weight is because insulin is the hormone that takes blood sugar to your cells where they get used as energy, and also the extra energy, extra glucose, extra blood sugar will get stored into your fat cells. So the more insulin gets spiked up, that means more blood sugar can enter your fat cells, aka you're going to gain fat. That's how gaining fat works. I'm exactly gonna explain it to you right here of how it makes us fat, exactly our metabolism. And the way I'm going to explain to you is the first thing you need to understand that this is how, for example, this is a fat person, and that's how their fat looks like. So basically our fat is made out of adipocyte fat cells. So basically this is a chunk of your fat. This is how it looks, has fat cells. Basically that fat cell is this. I'm just made it a bigger. So each fat cell works this way. So this is how our fat cell looks like. Basically you have the membrane, and then inside you've got little triglycerides. These are energy molecules your body, actually this is the base form of how your fat looks like. So basically this is how they get stored. This is your fat being stored. This is how fat looks like inside of your cell. So what happens after you eat bread? We know that leads to high levels of insulin. That's the main thing that happens after you eat bread. And that is what's going to happen. Insulin is a hormone that tells your body that it's time to store energy. As we know, it takes blood sugar into your fat cells. That process of gaining fat is called liponeogenesis, creation of new fat. And that's exactly what that means is basically your body produces, after you eat bread, that leads to high levels of insulin. And insulin creates these little triglycerides outside of your cell, and basically and takes them inside your cell. So basically your fat cell gains more of these energy molecules in your cell. That means your cell is going to expand in size. So your fat is going to expand in size, and a person will expand in size as well, aka gain fat. So this metabolic process is called liponeogenesis, creation of new fat, and it happens after you have high levels of insulin in your body. And you get high insulin because you ate bread, because insulin has a high glycemic index, and what it does, that spikes up blood sugar in your bloodstream. So insulin needs to be released. So after you have high levels of blood sugar in your bloodstream, if your body did not produce insulin, you would die, because that energy has to go somewhere. And if it stays in your bloodstream, you would just get nauseous, you will get dizzy, you will fall, and you will actually die. That's what type 1 diabetes is, when people have high levels of blood sugar in their bloodstream and their body doesn't produce insulin, so basically they need to inject insulin. And what that does, actually, studies have shown that people that have diabetes that inject insulin actually gain fat way quicker. This is a picture of a person that has a type 1 diabetes. This is the before treatment. Look how skinny they are. And after treatment, basically treatment is they literally inject a hormone called insulin in their body, in their blood, and that actually, look how it affects their body. They gain so much weight. And as I promised, I'm going to say what happens to your body when you do not eat bread. Exactly the opposite, how your body burns fat and why it burns fat if you do not eat bread. Basically, if you do not eat bread, that means you will have low levels of insulin. So basically, you don't eat bread, so that will lead to low levels of blood sugar in your bloodstream because you did not eat bread. And then that will lead to low levels of insulin. So what happens after you have low levels of insulin hormone in your body? That will spike up the opposite hormone. So if you do not eat bread, this hormone is going to get spiked up, and that hormone is called glucagon. And what you need to understand specifically about these two hormones is that when insulin is low, glucagon will be high. And when insulin is high, glucagon will be low, because they're released from the same organ called pancreas. And pancreas, this is released from alpha cells, this is insulin is released from beta cells, and they work hand in hand. When one is high, other one is low. Basically, they work like this. So after you have low levels of insulin, that will lead to high levels of glucagon hormone. And when you have high levels of glucagon hormone, what that's going to do, this is how your body burns fat, let's say burn fat. So this is your fat cell, and you have triglycerides, energy molecules, that your body actually stores fat. That's the base form how your fat looks like. So when a lot of glucagon is being released, high levels of glucagon, what that does, glucagon actually promotes a metabolic process called lipolysis. And what lipolysis does, it burns fat for energy. And how that looks is basically when you have high levels of glucagon. So glucagon basically tells your brain that you did not get enough energy by food. You actually need more energy. And how your body is going to get energy is by burning your fat cells, basically a stored energy that you have in your body. So when glucagon spikes up, your body takes these triglycerides, takes them out of the cell into your bloodstream, and they go to your brain, your muscles, your liver, where they get used as energy. And that metabolic process is called lipolysis, burning fat for energy. And that happens after you have high levels of glucagon, and you have high levels of glucagon after you do not eat bread or other foods that have a high glycemic index. And also what you need to understand that is actually can be crucial is intermittent fasting. The fastest way to actually get your pancreas to release as much glucagon as possible is by not eating anything. That's why intermittent fasting has way more benefits than just simply helping you achieve your calorie deficit. So what I always recommend, intermittent fast also be on a caloric deficit. That's the ultimate strategy, because then you'll have high levels of glucagon, you'll be in a caloric deficit. Basically, you would just have the ultimate strategy for weight loss. And also, when you eat, avoid bread, because bread is actually a killer when it comes to weight loss. Because as soon as you eat bread, your insulin will be spiked up. But what also insulin does, insulin, when you have high levels of insulin, that means this process cannot happen. Your body cannot actually tap into your fat stores. So for example, you always see people that are on a caloric deficit, but they don't necessarily burn a lot of fat for energy. Actually, studies have shown that like 50% of their weight loss people that are just focusing on calorie deficit, but they eat a lot of bread, they eat a lot of candy, a lot of foods that have a glycemic index and glycemic load, they actually burn way more muscle than fat. But when people actually focus on controlling these two hormones, insulin and glucagon, that will actually specifically target their fat. So if you want to lose weight, avoid bread, aka avoid foods that have a high glycemic index, because they will spike up your insulin hormone, and that will lead to actually blocking this process, because insulin is the hormone that blocks lipolysis. It stops triglycerides from getting out of your cell, even though you are in a caloric deficit. So take control of your hormones and also be in a caloric deficit, which is the ultimate strategy for weight loss. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.
When your brain goes numb, you can call that mental freeze. When these people talk too much, put it all in slow motion. Yeah, I feel like an astronaut in the ocean. Ay, what you know about rolling